I don't know, maybe you could understand Trump voters if you were a working class person. Um, so here's the thing about you deciding, like, so you decided that you knew my economic background and my position in the world simply because you disagree with me. So basically, my life story is that I grew up poor. I was in and out of homelessness. My mom couldn't work. She tried to live on government assisted money, but they wouldn't really give it to her because of various reasons. Women aren't diagnosed with anything related to endometriosis, for example, for more than 10 years because it's a female condition and women are not given as much healthcare as men. So conditions that only affect them are not heavily researched, not heavily understood by doctors, and not diagnosed very quickly. You can look up the statistics if you don't believe me. This meant that my mom couldn't get benefits for people who were disabled because the doctors were just not diagnosing her for years. They eventually did, but too late. And what this meant was that she didn't get enough money, but she couldn't work because she was too disabled by her condition, right? And she had a few other conditions going on as well that went undiagnosed until very recently. And so what that meant was we were in and out of poverty. I was starving. She'd get government assistance for being unemployed, but she had to show that she was applying for jobs. And if you are given jobs to apply for and you don't apply for them and show that you went there and did the interview, you lose your money. But the system that does that is very corrupt, and they started trying to pressure her into prostitution. So they were giving her escort jobs to go and apply for and threatening to cut off her money if she didn't apply for them. So obviously she didn't, and it cut off our money. And we ended up in places that were like really dire and having no home, and it was really awful, right? So I went through all of that and I became incredibly desperate for that to not be the rest of my life. So I went to study at university, but it was incredibly challenging. I was having seizures, I had undiagnosed Tourette syndrome, and I was incredibly poor, incredibly starving, fucking hungry, only had one set of clothes, and was in and out of homelessness during that time as well. When I finally got to the end of that course, I'd unfortunately fallen in with a guy who did a U-turn after a couple of years and turned violent. And I had to escape my town, restart my life, and I didn't get to finish university. I got my degree and I did really well. I just didn't get anything higher than that, unfortunately. So ending up alone with nothing to do, caring for my mom in a new town with no friends, I started a business. I started picking things up off the sea and selling them, literally. I picked up pieces of sea glass and I started making it into jewelry and things like this and selling it online. I started with zero money, literally zero in the bank, took out no loans, worked for years to save up the money that I was making from that, living off tins of baked beans and just cheap as fuck food, anything so I could scrape my pennies together to buy a box of like craft supplies, which I then sold on the same shop, which I took the money and bought more craft supplies, and I made a little craft store that was paying about 1,500, maybe 1,700 a month on a good month. Eventually, very, very slowly it got up to that point, and finally I could move out and live on my own. But unfortunately, my ex stole a lot of money from me. I was in debt. I had to break up with him. New ex, by the way, not the same ex. And so I was kind of struggling financially when I found Twitch by accident. And then I just started doing it as a hobby in between volunteering and running 4 different charities, running my own business, caring for my mom alone without any government assistance and no other family members to assist me, taking care of rescue animals at my home that people had abandoned and couldn't be fucked with, and still acing all of those things when I started doing Twitch. And Twitch took off, and within a month it was actually costing me money not to stay at home and play computer games, because if I went to work, I would have to work for like so long by comparison to earn the same amount of money I could earn from playing computer games for 2 or 3 hours on Twitch. So I was like, it doesn't make any financial sense to pay to go to work. So I started doing Twitch instead. And so from that story, you could see why I was going through poverty and I had to work up to being considered working class. I had to pay off thousands and thousands of pounds of debt just to have zero fucking money, just to work my way up to zero. Okay, so making assumptions about like my economic status as a way to say like the only possible reason why you wouldn't like someone who's been accused of rape so many times, who's incited terrorism, who's, you know, wreaked havoc in the world and done horrific things to people, right? The only reason why I wouldn't support him is just simply because I'm not poor enough. And I think that's absurd because poor people can be fucking rational too.